Truth. Unforbidden. Truth. Podcast.
Welcome to Unforbidden Truth. I'm Andrew. Today I'll be speaking with former LSD kingpin Seth Ferranti. After faking his death as a first-time nonviolent offender, Seth was sentenced to 25 years in prison for a kingpin conviction. In 2015, after serving 21 years of his 25-year federal prison sentence, Seth was released from prison. Upon his release, Seth has become a successful journalist, true crime publisher. He's even written prison and gangster stories for publications such as Vice, Don Diva, Penthouse, and other well-known publications. He even interviewed me for a segment in Penthouse years ago about murderabilia. Seth has wrote and directed a web series called Easter Bunny Assassin and partnered with Sean Retch to create White Boy, a documentary based on Richard Worst Jr., aka White Boy Rick. Here's my interview with outlaw filmmaker Seth Ferranti.
Yeah, I was born in Lemoore, California. So Lemoore, California is actually what they call the Central Coast. So it's out in the desert between San Diego and LA. You know, kind of out there. And I was born like on a Navy base, because the man that my mom was dating at the time that became my adopted father, he was a fighter pilot. So, they train the fighter pilots like out in the desert. So in case they crash, you know what I'm saying? There's nobody around. So he was actually training as a fighter pilot, and my mom met him, started dating him, and married him when I was 2.
Can you recall any positive and negative memories that stick out to you from your childhood?
I don't know, man. It's weird. It's not like I don't think I repress stuff. I think I have like a real selective memory. So like really like early childhood memories. I don't really have a lot, man. I don't really remember a lot until really like my teenage years. Specific. I mean, I remember generalities. Like I was an altar boy. I played a lot of sports. I was a newspaper boy. I used to have like a newspaper route, really from an early age, like probably like 9 or 10. Um, but I'd say like that pre 5, I don't remember a lot. So I don't know if it's selective or, I know some people, you hear some people and they're like remember stuff like when they were 2 or 3. I've never, had memories like that. So I don't really, I guess I had some school memories. It seems like I don't know. It's weird. I think like I don't know. Maybe this is true with a lot of people, but it seems like the things that really stick out to me from my childhood are like more negative memories. Like the first time like you got embarrassed in school, or the first time like you had a problem with a teacher, or like the first time you got in a fight. But it's not even like specific like vivid memories. It's more like just like the emotions, like how this stuff made me feel as a kid. So I don't know if that answers your questions. Yeah, but yeah, my childhood, I don't know. My childhood is just kind of a blur. I feel more like emotions, but I think it's because I'm more I got a lot of empathy. Like I feel stuff, and which is weird because really like I mean my writing, I try to write really visually, and now I'm doing film and that's really visual. But I think that power of empathy, or whatever you want to call it, that power of being able to feel emotion, I think that helps me in my writing and even my filmmaking, because in those visuals or in those words I can imply those feelings, or impact people with these emotions without really saying it directly. And I think that's kind of why besides being immersive and being able to immerse myself in what I do, I think that's why I've been successful.
Did you suffer any childhood abuse or trauma growing up?
No, I wouldn't say. I mean, I moved around a lot. I was a Navy brat, so that kind of sucked. We moved every 2 years, so it was like as soon as I got established, we would move. So, looking back, I mean, that kind of sucked. I was always like the new kid. But I would say the only trauma I experienced, and compared to people that have real trauma, my trauma is like nothing. But like when I was 13, I was told, that my adopted dad was not my dad, because he married my mom when I was 2. So I was told when I was 13, like, hey, this isn't your real dad. He adopted you when you're 2. Because I never knew my real dad. It wasn't until I was 13 then when my mom told me about him, and then I started forming a relationship. So I never had that relationship. So really, besides going to prison and getting like 25 years when I was 22, those are really the two most traumatic things that happened to me. And the first one was more emotional, because I had to deal with that was a 13-year-old kid, like, hey, this is your dad. This is, so I would say that kind of set me off a deep end, and that was the beginning of my dive into drug culture, and culminated in me going to prison for 25 years. But that's probably the two biggest things that impacted me in my life and kind of shaped me emotionally, and kind of shaped who I am and everything I've done.
So I hate to sound cliche and ask you a what if question, but do you think that if your father had been around, that you would have it would have changed the trajectory of your life and you would have went somewhere different and you would have avoided prison and all that?
I for a lot of years I like to think that, but it was like the blame game, because all the time, like, whatever we do, it's our actions, and we end up in whatever situation we're in. So I had that blame game, like, oh well, almost like that Jane's Addiction song, like "Had a Dad" or whatever, or even Pearl Jam, like, has a song like that, like, they where he finds out, like, this is your dad, and so that stuff kind of affected me for a lot of years, and I thought that, as I did all those years in prison, and even as I was a teenager, because every kid wishes for that relationship, with their father. Not to say, I mean, I had a relationship with my adopted dad. My adopted dad is a really good man, and he raised me. And I realize that now, as a grown man, I can look back and say, like, man, this dude raised me really good. He provided financially, but I miss, like, that. I did miss having, like, that, the blood father, because there's things about my real dad, like, I was never even around him, and there's, like, things we do exactly the same. It's just genetic. So, you like to think, like, maybe he would have understood me better. Maybe he would have raised me better. Maybe I wouldn't have clashed with him. But, I mean, basically, now as an older man, with all this time and reflection and doing all this time, and I'm kind of comfortable with who I am today, and I like who I am today. And I realize that if I didn't go through everything that I went through, I wouldn't be where I am and who I am today. Every little step that I took in life, every little thing I went through makes me who I am, and I like that. I like who I am right now. So, you know, you can always look back and say, like, what if? And I did for a long time, but I see it more now. It was like the blame game. Like, I'm trying to say, oh, and I kind of got over that, because I think a lot of people get stuck in that in life. Like, you think, like, oh, well, this happened to me, so I have to be like this. No, you don't have to be like that, man. You need to pick it up, whatever it is. I mean, dude, if people can get raped and people can get molested and all that type of terrible stuff, and they can move on and get on with their life, there's no reason that anybody, like, that has stuff like, like I'm talking about, or prison sentence or drug addiction, there's no reason why we can't get on with our lives, man. Because, I mean, and I'm not saying some people that have situations like that, they don't get on with their lives. They turns into a vicious cycle, or they get addicted to drugs, or they even kill themselves or die, and that's tragic. But you look at situations like that, there's a lot of people that they just move on, man. And that's what life is about: looking forward. Life is not about looking back. If you look back, you can get stuck in what happened to you, and you can dwell in it. So I kind of learned that in prison, doing all those years in prison, because I saw so many people, like, coming back, and I saw so many people fucked up, and I saw so many dudes that, like, they were fucked up because their girlfriend left them, or they were fucked up because their baby mama wouldn't let them see their kids or bring them to visit, or they were fucked up because their friend snitched on them, or they were fucked up because the government took everything from them and gave them a life sentence, or they were fucked up for whatever reason. And it's like they couldn't get past it. So it's like they just stayed in this chaos, like, inside themselves. And when you got chaos inside yourself, it leads to chaos outside yourself. It leads to you being comfortable in chaos. I mean, there's literally people in prison and in life, they are only comfortable when it's chaotic. because they are so chaotic inside. So, I think I kind of learned that by seeing other people, like people coming back into prison, and I'd be like, damn, dude, like you got out. Why would you come back? Like what, it was so bad out there, it was so awful. Like when you're in there, all you do is dream about getting out, then you get the chance to get out and you come fucking right back. And it's like, come on, man. So I kind of learned that by seeing all these people get stuck. And I kind of promised myself, it must have been like halfway through my bid, like probably in my early 30s, I promised myself, I'm like, because I had dreams, I had aspirations, I had stuff I wanted to do, when I got out. So I told myself, I'm like, I'm not going to get stuck. I'm not going to let real life get in the way. I'm not going to let anything that happened to me up to this point stop me from doing what I want to do. Because there's all types of talented people, in every walks of life, be it sports, be it writing, be it business, be it whatever, that they let whatever happen to them. We are our own worst enemies. So, when you dwell on that shit and you let it, I call it going down rabbit holes. And I do. I'm not gonna say I go down rabbit holes sometimes, bro. I go down rabbit holes and I just go and I fucking start reverberating and I'm all negative and I'm going down these rabbit holes. And luckily though, I got it where, I might do it, I might do it for 5 minutes, I might do it for an hour, I might even do it for a day, but I rebound quickly. I come out of it. Sometimes it takes longer than others, but I think that's nature. We can all go through that struggle, but some people just get stuck in it, bro, and it's like a rut and they can't get out. And that's what I witnessed when I was in prison from all these other people. And I was like, I'm not going to be like that. And I kind of move forward with my life. And, that's why I feel like I am today, because I don't let my past hold me back. The past is done. Even being like a convict, dude, ex-con in prison, dude, like trying to be a writer in prison. You know how I was spinning people from the prisoners, to people on the outside, to the prison guards, to the prison staff, to the prison administration. Like they told me I can't be a writer. Everybody told me that, bro. Like you can't be a writer. I mean, fuck you. Why can't I be a writer? I've seen other prisoners put out books. Why can't I put out a fucking book? I mean, it's not like there were a lot of them, but there were people that did it. So I was like, if they did it, same like I in there. I got 3 college degrees. Oh, you can't do this, you can't do that. And a lot of people get stuck, because their parents tell them that, their friends tell them that, their peers tell them that, their relatives, their mom and dad, their uncles, their kids, their wife, they tell them that. And people get stuck because they believe that shit. I don't let anybody tell me nothing. I'm going to do what I want to do. I'm going to manifest it and I'm going to make it a reality. And if I get stopped, if 10 roadblocks go up in my way, I'm going to try an 11th time. I'm going to try a 12th time. I'm going to try a 13th time. I'm going to try a 25th time until I maneuver around whatever that roadblock is to get to where I want to be.
I think that's a pretty good way of looking at it, because in a way you can call prison a roadblock in your life. As long as you don't have a life sentence, you're just trying to, move on and get on to the next step in your life.
Yeah, no, that's why I always say, like, look, I mean, bro, it's nice to have help. It's nice to have people to support you. It's nice to have people like what you do. It's nice to have fans. It's very really nice for people to buy the shit that you do, or so you can, you know, benefit from it financially. But at the end of the day, anybody, I mean, if you're doing a podcast, if you're collecting stuff, if you're doing art, if you're doing anything in this kind of creative entertainment realm, I mean, you got to do it because you got a passion for it. Like, dude, I make shit that I want to make. I mean, yes, do I want people to like it? Yes, but I do it because I want to do it. I do it because that's my obsession. That's my passion. That's what I want to do with my time. So really at the end of the day, I like that other people, like it. I like that I can make a living from what I do. But at the end of the day, I don't give a fuck. I'm going to do what I want to do anyhow because that's what I like to do. I was like that in prison. I'm like that out here. Now I'm doing these bigger projects like these films and shit. So obviously I might really want to do something. If I can't find the money for it, I can't do it. But I'm searching, I'm searching, and if it comes up, it comes up. Sometimes I even fund my own projects, but these projects I'm doing cost a lot of money. So, I kind of gotta pick 10 things I want to do, and then whatever one, there might be 1 out of 10 things that I can find the money for, and that's what I do. And it might not even be the thing that I want to do the most, but I've kind of learned that balance but still, at the end of the day, I'm not gonna, I'm not gonna let somebody just pay me to do something like, oh, here's money, do this. But then in the same regard, nobody has offered me a lot of money to do something. So maybe when I get to that point and somebody offers me a lot of money, maybe I'll do it. I don't know.
Right, right. Um, Circling back a little bit back to your childhood, going back as early as you can remember, when did your criminal activity start at an early age?
Um, I don't know. I think I was always I don't think I was a bad kid, but I was a reckless kid. I mean, I probably remember I mean, I used to steal stuff from stores. I'd say probably like 7 or 8, I think. Probably 7, 8. You know, I started like getting curious about like alcohol or cigarettes or drugs probably like around 11 or 12. I think I probably smoked cigarettes, or tried like some dip, probably like around 11 or 12, or maybe drank some alcohol. By 13 I was smoking weed. By 15 I had started doing, cocaine, and acid and mushrooms and shit like that. But yeah, I think the first thing was probably stealing stuff, you know. I remember probably even as like whatever, like probably a fifth or sixth grader, like I would go to school, I would just like steal somebody's bike. I didn't give a fuck. You know what I'm saying? But I don't know. I never saw it like I didn't steal it because I needed it or because I wanted to sell it. It was more like a joyride, like because I could. I was more like I was reckless. I was like a thrill seeker. So I never thought I like I say still to this day I've never thought of myself as a criminal because I didn't really, like when I sold drugs because I sold marijuana and LSD because I was an outlaw. I broke laws that I thought were wrong. And anything before that, even like stealing stuff, it was more like it was like for the thrill of it. It was for, not to conform, to kind of, break out from like, who or what you're expected to be. I never like that because they try to pigeonhole you, or they try to say like, this is the way to act, or, this is the way society is, and I just think it's like more free. I don't know. I mean, back 200, 300, 400, 500 years ago, I mean, even longer, I mean, motherfuckers just used to get in boats and go maraud and rape and pillage, and that was like accepted behavior. So I don't know. I just, not to say, that's what I would have been doing, but I probably would have been doing that shit, if I was like a Viking or, you know, but I mean, whatever. It's whatever society you're in, whatever the times are. They try to dictate, who you are and what you're supposed to be. And I've just always been resistant to that. It's like when you think like a little kid, right? Like if a little kid, just wants to like run around and scream, they just like run around and scream because that's what they feel like doing. It's not till their parents and people and teachers and they start saying, no, you can't do that. No, 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 no. I never liked that people telling me no. I wanted to do what I wanted to do. Who are you to tell me what is right or wrong? I can determine what is right or wrong. And I think I got a real good moral compass. I don't go around hurting people. I don't do no heinous stuff. I never carried a gun. I never even really beat anybody up. I mean, I defended myself and got in fights and shit, but I never like, bully people or beat anybody up or took shit from people. I've never been, and I've always been like real fair. I've even defended people that got bullied and stuff like that. But, still at the same time, I was kind of reckless. I would like to joyride, and I kind of got a thrill out of doing stuff, that you weren't supposed to do. In the degrees and regard that I'm talking about.
When did the like drug dealing start at an early age? Was that prior to turning 18?
Oh yeah, like so I started smoking weed like around 13, and I immediately found out. I found out real quick that if you like scored for like your friends, then you got like free drugs. So I found that out really quick, like probably like by 13, 14. It didn't take me very long because I was the type of kid. Like I would go score the stuff. Like, when I was 13, it was before I moved to England, and we were living in San Jose, California. So they have like these drug strips where you could go in cars and stuff like that. And I would go with my friends, and I might have some older friends, a couple years older than me driving, but I would usually be the dude that did the deal. I would be the dude that had the money. I would look at the weed, you know what I'm saying? So I was kind of savvy like that. I'd be like, look at it, make sure, we're ripping off, make sure it's real. Not to say not, I mean, like I got ripped off just like anybody else can get ripped off, but I would learn from my mistakes. So, and like I think it was too because I was reckless. I was bold and reckless. Even as a 14-year-old. And also you got to know too that like when I was 14, I was already like basically like 6'1". I like by 13, like I grew real tall real quick. And I started to get like facial hair like around 13. So at 13, 14, I was hanging out with like 16, 17, 18-year olds. My girlfriends were like usually 2, 3, 4 years older than me. So I was always like the 14, 15-year-old. I was like the freshman who was hanging out with like the juniors and seniors, just because I was tall and I had facial hair and I was kind of bold, reckless, aggressive. And, basically, once I kind of found out, about my dad's situation and that was revealed to me, I didn't really give a fuck. I was kind of not like I had a death wish, but I didn't give a fuck. I was angry. And at that age at 13, I didn't know how to deal with those emotions. So how I dealt with them was just by, acting out, being reckless, bold, brash, you know, um, aggressive or whatever. So I was always kind of like known like, Seth is a guy, he'll go get the drugs. So I learned real quick, like if you gave me $25 and three other people gave me $25 and I went and bought a, ounce or half ounce or whatever, then I didn't have to put it in anything, and we would still break it up 5 ways. So I would get my fifth without putting in any money. So once I learned that, but it was gradual. I don't think really I only had like a little 9 month run. Probably like from 90 into 91, where I was actually making a lot of money. You know, but before that, it was just building, 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 and then it kind of really clicked when I caught my case, like when I was 20, 19, 20, and I kind of had this like 9 month run, where I was making like, 20, 25 grand a month, supplying like 15 colleges in 5 states on the East Coast. But before that, it was kind of, hit or miss, but by that time I had established, my weed connect, several weed connects. I established my LSD connects, and I kind of started you know, having what they would call like a run or something. But it was really short. It was like 9 months.
And that started after you turned 18.
Yeah, like when I was 19 and 20. But I started to dabble in dealing like probably like around 14. And then I moved to England when I was 15, so I lived in England for a couple of years. We were stationed over there, because my adopted dad was in the Navy military. And over there I went to school on this it was like an Air Force base, like a British Air Force base called High Wycombe. And they had like an American school on there called London Central. And everybody got bussed in. And then they had a bunch of dorm students, like people whose families were diplomats or in Scotland or different places. They were all shipped there. And I used to go down in the town, and down in the town, it was like a lot of Jamaican dudes, in the Jamaican area or the black areas. That's where you could get the hash and stuff like that. And it was all military kids, but I didn't have no problem. I would take everybody's money and I'd go right down there, and I would find out who had the hash, because they didn't even have weed over there at that time. You could get weed. If they did have weed, it kind of like smelled like tea. It wasn't very good. It was mostly hash. So I would just go in. I didn't have any problem like going up, talking to people, introducing myself, and asking them like, hey, where can I get this?
So what was like an average like weekly net, of earnings prior to the case that landed you a 25-year prison sentence, like say from 18 to 19, 20 years old?
Well, like I said, I had that 9 month run where I was probably making like 20, 25 grand a month. But before that, it was like, I might have some good runs and I might have some bad runs. I might have some stuff where, I spend 10 grand and make like 15 or 20 back. Or then sometimes I had where, I invest money. And, the thing with drugs is to make money, the money has to come back quick. So it's all about like, supply and demands. So let's say like you got whatever, you got 50 pounds of pot. If you move 50 pounds of pot in a month and you're making like 500 a pound, then you're making like 25 grand in like a month. But if that same 50 pounds is taking you 3 months to move, then you're making 25 grand over 3 months. And you're spending money the whole time because when you're the dude dealing the drugs, you're paying for everything for your friends. Like if you're having parties, you're buying all the food, you're buying all the beer, plus you're smoking free weed with anybody. So if you're just smoking free weed with everybody for a month, it's a lot different than if you're smoking free weed with everybody for 3 months. So it's all about turnover. How quick can you turn it over? That's how you make money with illegal substances or contraband items. It's about moving it quick. And back then it was brick pot too. It was brick pot. We used to get the brick pot from Mexico. It wasn't that good. So the brick pot would take a long time to move. When I did usually make a lot of money off weed, it was in the fall, like when it was harvest. Because at harvest time in the fall, like September, October, I would get weed sent from like Humboldt County, Emerald Triangle, to Virginia to the East Coast, and that was like what we call kind bud. That was like the good weed. I mean, today they just call that shit like outdoor, and it's nothing compared to the indoor strains that they have available now. But but back then, compared to the brick pot, that shit was like that shit. We called it the kind bud. So I would get pounds sent from out there, and that shit used to move quick because it was so good. And sometimes I could sell that shit for like 200 an ounce. So I might pay anywhere like 18, 15 to 18, we're talking like, 88, 89. And I would sell that shit. I would get like 32 back. So I was almost doubling my money. And then not only would I get the weed out of Northern California, the Emerald Triangle, but I used to get weed out of southeastern Kentucky. They used to have some really good weed. Down there they got a lot of clay in the soil. So they used to get this, really kind of fruity orange tinge, or a red tinge weed, popcorn buds. They used to have some really nice outdoor too that I used to go down there every harvest, in the fall, usually September, and get it. And that pot would even be cheaper sometimes, maybe like 12 to 16. And the same, I could sell that shit like $200 an ounce. So, think if I got 20 pounds, and I made, 800 $800 a pound, that's basically like 16 grand. So, I could turn 16 grand and like that shit would move sometimes in like 2 weeks.
And you're
But
mainly selling to like college students and high school students and stuff like that?
yeah, yeah, yeah. And then with the LSD, so I would get like 100 sheets of LSD, which is like 10,000 hits. And I might pay like 30 cents a hit. And I was a wholesaler though. If you sold at retail, you could sell $5 a hit. But who's going to sell like 10,000 hits at $5 a hit? I mean, that's a lot of traffic, right? So I would sell like 10 lots. So I would sell like 1,000 hits at a time, and I would get like 80, 90 cents a hit. So I would double my money, but still, I didn't make a lot of money off the LSD. I might make like 5, 6 grand off of 100 sheets. And I was doing that. It got eventually. Especially when I turned like 19, 20, like I got where I was doing like 100 sheets. I was doing like 10,000 hits a month.
I'm not really familiar with LSD. Is a sheet just what like you put under your tongue and it dissolves? Is that just one sheet?
No, that's one hit. So a sheet has 100 hits. You know what I'm saying? So I would have like 100 sheets of acid. Like that's 10,000 hits. It would come like ten sheets in a page. So, 10 sheets would be called a page, and then 10 pages we would call a book. So if you had a book, that'd be like 10,000 hits. If you had a sheet, that would be like 100 hits. If you had a page, that would be like 1,000.
Hmm. Um, Prior to the case that landed you a 25-year federal prison sentence, did you have any interactions with the law, whether it be like arrested, convicted, jail time, anything of the sort?
None. I didn't never even had a traffic ticket. I was like a first time nonviolent offender.
So let's talk about that case that landed you a 25-year prison sentence. At the age of 20 years old, you were arrested for a multitude of crimes, which brought federal charges. Can you walk me through each charge, each event, what went down with each charge?
Yeah, I was indicted on a bunch of like they used to stack conspiracy charges, right? So I was indicted on a bunch of conspiracy charges, and each conspiracy charge is like 10 to life. You know what I'm saying? So look, like all these different people snitched on me, right? So they said, oh, like Seth was doing this, he did this deal, he did this deal, he did this deal. And if you're doing a deal with more than three people, it's considered a conspiracy. So, if I give you the drugs and you give him the drugs, and I know that you give him the drugs, that's a conspiracy. I mean, it's a really bullshit law. So, so they would take, okay, I did this deal with you, I did this deal with you, I did this, and then they stack all the charges, but they still run it consecutive. So it was like, it's like you're facing like, 7 10 to life counts. You know what I'm saying? So, but then what I did, I pled guilty. They gave me a plea deal for a kingpin charge, which was a 20 to life. You know what I'm saying? But what I did is the whole time because I wouldn't go to trial because the dudes were lining up to testify against me. And even though I never got caught with any drugs, all the people that got caught with the drugs said they were mine. Which, I mean, they were mine. But, I mean, in retrospect, maybe I should go to trial. But, at that time, I was like, fuck it. I'm just going to take off. I had a little bit of money. I had jackrabbit in my blood. I thought I was a counterculture outlaw. So I was like, fuck it. They can't catch me. Fuck these motherfuckers. So I took the fuck off, and became a fugitive. And most of the people on my case pled guilty. A couple went to trial. One guy got acquitted. Another guy got 16, but then he ended up getting LSD reduction, so he only did about 8. So really, it's crazy. Out of all the people on my case, you could take everybody on my case and you can add up all their time together, and I did more time than all of them. And it was like a conspiracy. But again, too, they said I was like the kingpin of the conspiracy. But it wasn't like I was a kingpin. I was just, I had the connects. I was just like a freelancer. You know what I'm saying? And I had different people that I did different business with at the colleges. But when the feds came knocking, everybody just started flipping, like dominoes. So, like giving information, and everybody pointed the finger at me. And then at the trial, so I took off, so I wasn't even there. So then, since I wasn't there, the people that went on trial, their lawyers were trying to deflect everything off of their clients and putting it all on me. So it just like, it was like crazy. Like everybody fucking blamed me, first off to get out of their charges, and second off because I wasn't there. So, let's point the finger at Seth, and and it's crazy too because I became like a top 15 U.S. Marshals list, most wanted fugitive, and I always thought that was crazy because I was like a first time nonviolent offender. I'm like, why would you make me like top 15? Like, why would you make me, the highest priority, in the whole fucking United States? Because you got like the top 10 FBI most wanted list, and then you got like the top 15 U.S. Marshals list. So were you telling me as a first time nonviolent offender, from the suburbs, dealing fucking weed and LSD, like I was one of the most 25 most wanted people in the fucking United States, which is fucking ridiculous when you look at it in retrospect. But what happened was there was this dude, assistant prosecutor in the Eastern District of Virginia named like Henry Hudson, and I don't know. I guess he saw like I was like the black mark on their record because they thought I was going to cooperate. They thought I was going to bring all these people and get them all these convictions, and they didn't get shit out of me because I took the fuck off, right? So once I took off, I was like the black mark on his record. So this dude, he switched from the assistant prosecutor in Eastern District of Virginia to the head U.S. Marshal in the Eastern District, and he did the paperwork to make me, the most wanted, 15 top 15 most wanted. And that it was crazy too because when I got caught, some of the U.S. Marshals, when I got caught in October '93, some of the U.S. Marshals, and I had no idea I was like top 15. That was like a surprise to me. When I got caught, they're asking me to sign my fucking most wanted poster or something like I'm a celebrity and shit. That shit was like weird. But when I got caught, I like a lot of the U.S. Marshals, they were kind of like, why are you like top 15? I'm like, I don't fucking know. And I got like a lot of them, they would make comments like, man, somebody must have did a lot of paperwork. So I didn't even know about this dude, Henry Hudson, until like years later after I'd been in prison, like 10 years. And I started filing like Freedom Information Acts. And then I find this dude, and this dude is the one that did all the paperwork. And it's weird now because check out, the same dude is a Fourth Circuit. He's a Fourth Circuit appeal court judge. So it's weird. It's weird how law enforcement and how prosecutors and almost like politicians and shit work in our country, because it's like what they do, the DEA or these prosecutors, like every new case is like the biggest case. So they build like these cases into to as big as possible and exaggerating everything. So then when the person gets caught or they get a conviction, it makes them look good. And that's what the whole war on drugs it is built around, because the in the drug world it's just like any other business. Like if you cut off the heads, five new heads are going to pop up, because it's about money. People want the money, people want the power, people want the respect. So it's self-perpetuating. There's always going to be somebody new. You're never going to fucking cripple the organization. You're never going to cripple the drug trade because the money's so lucrative. There's always going to be more people that are willing to do it. So that's why prosecutors, what they do, like every new case is like the new public enemy number one, the biggest case. If you read this stuff or you look at stuff or you watch the news, it's just ridiculous. How is every new case the biggest case? Because that's how they justify the hype. That's how they get the media headlines. That's how they get their name out there so they can be reelected, or so how they can move into politics. And I'm going to give you the perfect example. Everybody knows Rudy Giuliani, right? You know how Rudy Giuliani made his name? He prosecuted John Gotti in the 80s in New York. So I'm saying it's just the way our justice system is not set up for justice. Our justice system is set up for prosecutors to make big cases and get their names in the news so that they can become judges, so that they become politicians, so that they can become, senators or governors. That's how it's built. That's how it's set up. So it's not about justice. They call it justice system, but it's not about justice at all, because the prosecutors, they don't give a fuck about, right or wrong or gray area. They just care about making a big case and getting their name in the news, because that's how they advance their career.
Um, Backing up a little bit, prior to becoming a fugitive, there was an incident in which you tried to convince authorities that you had died. Is that correct?
Yeah. So what I did, I faked my suicide. So I had this idea in my mind. I was like, if Seth Ferranti is dead, in 7 years, if they don't find a body, I can be declared legally dead. So once I'm declared legally dead, then there's no more charges. So I had this idea in my mind. So I was like, how can I, make it seem like I'm dead? So I remember reading in the paper all the time in the Metro section of the Washington Post, like people would always commit suicide in this area. It's a national park called Great Falls, where they have like these class 5 rapids and they have all these rocks. So like if you jump in the water, you can't swim, so you're going to drown or you're going to get smashed into the rocks. So people would always jump in the water right there and they would always die because you can't swim, and you get smashed into the rocks. So I knew this once I had always read these articles, or I always caught them. So when this went down, I like, staged my suicide. I was like, you know what? I made up a plan. I staged my suicide. I bought a car. I had a suicide note. I started dropping hints like, I can't take this. I can't take this. I'm not going to prison. I'm going to commit suicide. And so I made like this whole elaborate ruse, and then I was going to take off and be like, fuck them. But my plan. I mean, I was only 20, right? But my plan was awesome, except for one fucking thing, right? I faked my suicide on the wrong side of the dam. I thought my body would like go in the Potomac River and wash out to the Atlantic Ocean, but where this area where I did it, they have dams to calm the water down because they have all the bridges going into DC. So that the dams calm the water down because it was like really, rapid, rough water. So I did it on the wrong side of the dam, and they dragged the river for 2 weeks in front of the dam, and nobody turned up. So they the park rangers told the prosecutors, and the prosecutors declared my suicide a hoax.
And that's when you became a fugitive then?
Yeah.
Do you think that's why you were placed on the top 15 most wanted list, is because you tried to fake your suicide?
Yeah, I think that, but it was also because that dude Henry Hudson, I was like a black mark on his record. I was like the one that got away, and that probably irked him because he probably had an idea back then that he wanted some federal judgeship. And in law enforcement, like if you don't make a case or somebody gets away, that makes you look bad. That's like a minus for you. And it's obvious he had, you know, political and judge aspirations. So he had to get me. He had to make me out to be more than I was. But I think the suicide, yeah, they added to it, and they were probably also like, who's this fucking kid that fucking came up with this fucking elaborate ruse that almost worked?
Did you feel like you were going to get away with it, or do you feel like they catch up to you
No,
sooner than later?
I thought I was gonna get away with it, man. I mean, I was kind of like crestfallen, heartbroken when I read in the newspaper, the Washington Post, that they declared my suicide a hoax. I was like, fuck, because I thought I planned everything right. But at the time too, looking back in retrospect, I mean, I was smoking a lot of weed, I was tripping a lot of acid, so I wasn't as sharp mentally as I should have been. But I mean, it was still a good plan. I just missed that one fucking detail, So whatever shit happens, and even when I was a fugitive, I didn't think they were going to catch me. I never thought I was going to get busted. I always thought I was too smart. So maybe my confidence in a way led to my own downfall. But I just didn't think they were going after like white drug dealers from the suburbs who sold weed and LSD. Because at first when the war on drugs started, they didn't. I mean, it was all motivated by race. They were going all for the black guys in the inner cities who were dealing crack cocaine. That's what those laws, the mandatory minimum and sentencing guidelines, which I was sentencing over, those are racist laws that our president Joe Biden, he was the one who orchestrated all those laws and led that movement. So it's crazy they talk all this stuff about Joe Biden, and I'm like this dude started the war on drugs. You know, I mean, yeah, there was Bush and there was Reagan on the Republican side, but the dude on the Democrat side was Biden. So everybody talks like he's a savior or whatever. And I'm like, man, this dude started the fucking war on drugs. Fuck him. I've never been a Joe Biden fan, but so whatever. But all those laws were set up to target minorities, specifically blacks and crack cocaine. But 91, I was in that first big sweep in the suburbs because the federal government, the DEA, they were getting a lot of pushback because the laws, we can look back now and say, the laws are racist. So they were getting a lot of pushback saying, these laws are racist. So, they went out to the suburbs and said, look, we bust white drug dealers too. And I was in that first wave.
Looking back now, what do you think it was that caught up to you to getting arrested?
I mean, I continued to sell weed. I mean, I was selling weed when I was a fugitive at the height of the war on drugs. I mean, I sold weed more from 91 to 93. I mean, it was just a bad time to sell any type of drugs. Even though I considered weed and psychedelics like righteous drugs, and I didn't think I was a criminal. I thought I was outlaw because I was breaking laws that I thought was wrong. And I feel real justified now, the way things have turned. Maybe I was a little early, I was a trailblazer of sorts, 30 years ahead of my time or whatever you want to say. But I feel justified, but still, I mean, it was stupid. I mean, I was selling drugs at the height of the war on drugs. I mean, everybody was snitching. It was bound, it was inevitable that I was going to get caught as I continued in that vocation. I should have just got a regular job or started some other business. I probably would have never got caught.
So looking back now, when you were arrested, convicted, and sentenced to 25 years for a nonviolent crime, what was your reaction when you were handed down your sentence?
Well, the feds, when they hand down the sentences, they do it by months, right? So they don't say like 25 years, they say like 304 months. So when I was sentenced, I heard that in courtroom. I was like 304 months, and I was like, my first thought was like, oh, that's not that bad. 304 months doesn't sound that bad. Doesn't sound like 25 years. But then I started adding it up in my head, right? I was like, wait, 12 plus 12 plus 12 plus 12 plus 12 plus 12 plus 12. You know what I'm saying? And then I was like, fuck. I was like, that's 25 years, 4 months. But at first, the way they say it doesn't sound that bad. But then, it sucked because I was only 22 and I had more time than how fucking old I was, dude. It was fucking like crazy. And I was like a first time nonviolent cannabis LSD offender. Like I say, still despite everything that happened to me, I'm proud to be an American. This is my country. I love my country. So I was kind of like, why would my country do this to me? Like I had never felt like I was doing anything wrong, like I was doing anything bad. I felt like people needed to smoke pot, people needed to trip on LSD because, it had spiritual, medicinal, and therapeutical value. It opened people's minds. It made you think different. But, that's one of the reasons why they started prosecuting and going after all the hippies in the 60s, because, the powers that be, they don't want you to be a free thinker. They don't want you to challenge the status quo. They don't want you to not conform. The rich people, they like how shit is. So that's how they remain rich. The elite, in the 80s, we used to say like the top 10% had all the money. But now it's like the top 1% has all the money. So it's just really gotten worse. But I was against all that. I was challenging that. And I felt these drugs, helped you to see the truth.
Well, the very first prison bus ride, the very first bus ride in which you went to prison, do you remember what that feeling was like? Were you scared, nervous, or were you prepared from what the guys told you in, I guess, county or the detention center?
Um, I would say, yeah, I was scared, man. I've never been in prison before. I didn't know anybody who'd ever been in prison, so I was like, fuck, what? If somebody's going to try to rape me, I'm going to have to fucking kill somebody. I'm going to have to fight. I didn't know what I would have to do, but I mean, I was ready. I wasn't a big dude, but, I was tall. I was probably like 6'1", 185. I was pretty athletic, but I look young as fuck, dude. I look like a little college student, and really county jail wasn't that bad. And then it really hit me that I was in prison when they shipped me into the feds, and we stopped at Terry Hut, Indiana. There's an airstrip there, and all the dudes from the penitentiary came on, and there's just like all these big ass, muscle bound, tattooed white dudes that look like fucking Zeus or fucking Viking warriors or big bikers, Aryan Brotherhood type of dudes. And then there were like these massive black dudes, like bald heads, like, with bandanas on. They looked like gangbangers. And then these Spanish dudes with these big mustaches and tattoos. And I was like, whoa. I was like, these dudes fucking look fearsome as fuck. And it was crazy because since I was an escape risk, since I was top 50 most wanted fugitive, they made me sit in the back of the plane, and I had a black box on, right? And I'm like this little skinny college looking kid. So all these fucking like hardcore convicts were getting on the plane, and they're looking at me like, who the fuck is this dude? Because they're not black box. I'm black box. I'm sitting in the special. I'm sitting in the back of the plane. I got a U.S. Marshal right across from me, looking at me the whole time. Because they said I was an escape risk. So that was kind of crazy. So plus I had a lot of time, right? Like even when I first came in, I came in 93. So there were still a lot of people from the 80s, before they made, those laws, the federal sentencing guidelines and mandatory minimums like 88. So there were a lot of dudes that they were doing old time where you could still get paroled and stuff like that. And, even like a kingpin charge, they only give you like 10 years where I got like 25 years. So, it was kind of like, They're like, well, who the fuck are you? How much time you got? How'd you get all that time? How many people did you kill? And I was like, none. I was like, I sold weed and LSD at colleges. Yeah, so it was kind of crazy.
So when you did get to prison as a young adult still, how did you spend your time on a day-to-day basis, being you had decades to serve?
Um, I worked out. I played sports. I was real athletic. I took college classes, stayed in the law library, started writing. I stayed out of the mix, man. I stayed out of the drama. I never joined any gangs. I kind of stuck to myself, and if I had to fight, I would fight. But I tried not to get in those serious beefs or whatever. If I got in a fight and somebody whooped my ass, they whooped my ass. I'd be like, okay, you whooped my ass. I try not to, get into no serious beefs, where I had to get a knife or stab somebody or anything like that. I was also lucky in some regards because I started out, I was only in the medium high, so I did 12 years in the medium highs, what they call the gladiator schools, and then I did 9 years in the lows. So I was never like in the USPs. I was never like in the super max. You know what I'm saying? Where in the USPs they say boys fight, men kill. And in the medium highs they call them gladiator schools, like you fight. It's like young dudes trying to prove that they're men. Whereas the USP it's like men, so they don't fight. If they got a beef, they just stab you, and they don't stab you once or twice. In the medium highs, the gladiator schools, people would get shanked, they would get poked, but dudes would poke them like two, three, four times. In the penitentiaries, like they're trying to kill you, bro. They're like stabbing you like 60 times. So, it was a difference. So I was lucky in that regard. But like also I had Italian last name, so even though I wasn't Italian, for my adopted dad, I had Italian last name, and I was on the East Coast, so there was a lot of mobsters. So I get to hang out with Italians because they came to me, make sure I'm not a snitch. Who's your dad? Where's your family from? And even though I wasn't mafia related or whatever, that family, my adopted dad's family is from the East Coast, like Boston, so they kind of would take me under their wing. So right off the bat, I'm hanging like with the mafia dudes. And then like I grew up in California, so they're like, "Where are you from?" Even though my case was out of Virginia, they're like, "Where are you from?" I'm like, "California." So they go get my homies from Cali. There's the Mexican gangbangers, like the Serranos, and they're like the toughest dudes. There's not that many of them. There's only like five or six of them, but they're like known as the toughest dudes, like on the yard. Like they're the Mexican mafia. Don't nobody fuck with those dudes. Those dudes will fucking stab you quick. So immediately I got 25 years. I'm this young kid, and people see me on the compound with like mafia guys and like these Serranos. I start working out with Serrano dudes. So it's kind of like fucking, like who the fuck is this dude? And in prison, it's funny because in prison, like you're judged by your allies. So, I had the time, I wasn't a snitch, and I'm hanging out with like, the mafia guys that have the biggest mythology in crime, and I'm hanging out with the Serenos who are like the toughest guys on the yard. So I kind of lucked out. Maybe in some different situation, in a different prison or a different place, maybe things would have turned out different. I don't know.
Do you feel like you've gained any type of knowledge or any positive experiences from being incarcerated, as shitty as it is?
Um, I mean, maybe who I am today, man. I learned a lot. I mean, I grew to be a man, behind those fences, bro. I mean, I went in a kid. And I came out a grown man. I mean, doing all that time, I've thought about everything. I've read every scenario through my head, and every aspect of my life and every reason, like why I am who I am. I had a lot of time to think. You know, um, I know what I'm capable as a man. I know what I'm not capable of. I know who I am. I'm very comfortable with who I am and what I can do and what I can't do. So, when you're in those type of situations, when you get in, I've been in situations on the yard, like racial situations where, you got like 100 white boys with fucking knives, and you might have like, 250 black dudes, and dudes are ready to go riot. They're ready to have a war. And, it's just, a few calm heads that kind of mediate and alleviate the situation. So I've been in a lot of situations like that. I've been in situations in the block, in the unit where, maybe some big white boy might have, fucked up a Mexican or slapped him around or beat the shit out of him. And then there's like 25 Mexicans. Every Mexican in the fucking block is fucking around that fucking big white boy with fucking knives. And I've waded into the middle of that and fucking found a familiar face, somebody that I played soccer with, like a Mexican or something that I got a rapport with, and I fucking talked him down, and I've grabbed the big white boy by his fucking ear and took him back and be like, you got to apologize and make this shit right now, or these motherfuckers are gonna stab you, they're gonna fucking poke you. You know what I'm saying? So when you deal with situations like that, and even in there, I've never been a tough dude. I've never been a tough dude. I mean, I could fight. You know what I'm saying? You fight because you got to fight. But like, I'm not like no MMA fighter. I'm not like no badass fucking. I got my ass whooped as many times as I whooped somebody's ass. But I've always been in there. I was always the diplomat. I was always the person who put out the fires. I was always the person like, if a white boy got his shoes stolen, I could go get them back. I could go to the block. I could find out who stole them and I could get the shoes back. I was a dude, like if a white boy was getting pressed, I could go and talk to him and be like, yo, man, leave homie alone. Homie's with us. So that's the type of dude I was in there. And that wasn't at first, I had 10 years, my first 10 years, it wasn't like that, but the longer you've been in prison, you get like these stripes on your arms. And if you're a solid dude, if you're not a snitch and if you carry yourself the right way, you know what I'm saying? And if you're known like you will fight, you're not a chump, you gain respect. So, I spent my first probably 6, 7, 8 years, fighting, and gaining respect, but I was playing sports too, and I was good at sports. So, people kind of look up to physical prowess in prison, just like on the outside, like good people, high school people are good athletes, so people from my block or people from my race, or people from my team, they would cheer for me or whatever. So, but this was something that developed over time. So I got to be like, the last 10 year of my bid, where like I'd be running like the TV rooms for the white boys. I'd be like the unit rep. I was never like a shot caller or anything for the compound, but I would be the unit rep. I'd have to report, to the shot caller on the compound. I would control the, if it was one TV or two TVs, I would control the white boy TVs and I would say, what went on and who watched what. And mainly I would be granted this just because I was fair, and I had done a lot of time and I knew how to deal with people.
So after serving a little more than 21 years in multiple federal penitentiaries, you were finally released from prison walls. Do you remember that? Do you remember what that feeling was like the moment you stepped out of those walls?
Yeah. So the first thing I did when I went out, um, like within the first hour, I went to a Walmart, because I was going to the halfway house and I had to buy like work stuff and other stuff. And go walking through the Walmart was like sensory overload, dude. Like all the choices, like it was really, like because I was used to like writing shit on a list and put it in a little slot and they give me a bag of my stuff. You know what I'm saying? And you don't have any choices. There's like one peanut butter. You can get like smooth or crunchy. You know what I'm saying? There's no brands. I mean, there's brands, but it's like one choice. You can buy like gray sweats. You can buy like white socks, gray shirts, white shoes, or you didn't have any choices. So when I walked through that Walmart, dude, and like I'll just give this example, like you go through like the peanut butter aisle, there's like 20 different peanut butters, bro, and I was kind of like, like I had a moment, like I was stuck. I was like, whoa, it was like sensory overload, and it even got to the point like when I went to the halfway house and stuff, and you got to get different stuff, because you're coming home, so you got to get different stuff for work, different cosmetics, and I would always get my wife, I would ask her to go store for me, because it was like too much for me. It was like too many choices, it was hard to deal with. I eventually got over that. How I got over that was I had a kitchen job. So I worked two jobs when I got out. I worked at a law firm during the day, like 9 to 5, and then I worked at a kitchen, like 6 to 10 or 6 to midnight as a cook, line cook or whatever. So, but sometimes I was like the new guy, so I would get signed out from like 6 to 12 to work, but sometimes they would cut me like at 10 o'clock, because I was the newest guy, so I'd get cut early if it wasn't busy. So, I'm not going back to the halfway house. I was like, fuck that, I'm signed out till 12. So a lot of times I would just go to the Walmart like late at night when there wasn't so many people in there, and I would just walk around to get myself, you know, acclimated, to the store and the choices and kind of, I did that, dude. I did that a lot, that first 6 months I was out. And another thing that was weird for me was like when I would go to stores or something and or just being in crowds or being around a lot of people was like I felt like a giant. I mean, I'm not even that big, I'm only like 6'1", maybe like 215, 220. So I'm not like even super big. Like in prison, I was just like a medium sized dude. There's like big dudes in prison. I time I hear people call me big guy or whatever, but I never consider myself big because big, prison dudes are like 6'5", 250, 260, whatever. So but when I went to some of these stores and I'd be around like a lot of women and children, like it made me feel awkward like that first 6 months, because I hadn't been around a lot of women and children except maybe in the visiting room, and they were always with, like the man of the family or the guy that was locked up, so he might be my homie or might not. So you might say what's up, but I didn't have a lot of contact other than with, my family, or girl, or who eventually became my wife, when I would talk to her, or my family, brother, sister, mom, dad. So it was kind of like I don't know, it was awkward. Like I had to get used to it because I felt like a giant, like around all these women and kids. I felt like I stuck out. So that was kind of weird. That was like a transition. And then the phones, the driving, but it was all different to me because they didn't have like those phones when I got locked up in '93. They didn't even have the internet. So it took another thing that was weird. So it took me a long time, dude. It took me like 9 months of being out to figure out the difference. Like people talk about bandwidth, right? And so you got like cellular and Wi-Fi. And it took me like 9 months, dude, to figure that out because I was like, well, if you got cellular, you can download something. You got internet, or if you got Wi-Fi, you got the internet. Because I didn't understand the concept of bandwidth as it applies to cellular and Wi-Fi. When I thought of bandwidth, I thought of like a transistor radio. Like a transistor radio has like a bandwidth, like on the dial, like on an AM radio dial. Like that to me was a bandwidth. So, this concept of cellular and Wi-Fi and bandwidth, and being able to download, you need Wi-Fi to download like big files. It took me like 9 months to understand that. I couldn't grasp the concept, but eventually I did.
So, since being released in 2015, you found success in so many different places. Tell me a little bit about what you've been up to since then.
Well, man, I started right out. I was writing in prison. I was writing for Vice, and I was writing for a bunch of other places. Um, but then, so I was probably like a national true crime journalist for like my first 5 years out. But I had published a lot of gangster books and stuff, on the mafia and African American drug lords, and gangs and prison life while I was in prison. So getting out, I already had a little bit of head start, so I already had like fans, people knew about my work and shit like that. So, but I had a dream, I had a vision when I got out. This formed like my last 10 years. I wanted to be a filmmaker. I wanted to be like the Quentin Tarantino of like true crime. So I was writing all this stuff. I was doing features for Penthouse, and I was writing all these cool stories, these gangster stories, that I loved, prison gangs, shit like that. And it also helped because I started writing for Vice when they were just like this little magazine, and Vice kind of blew up, and I kind of blew up with them. And I also wrote for these other like street magazines like Don Diva and Feds. And I was writing like these cool stories about the African American drug lords that like nobody had written before. I was kind of like a trendsetter in that regard. I was like a trailblazer. Nobody was writing these stories, and I was writing them for these magazines. And, I eventually formed my website and publishing house, Gorilla Convict, while I was in prison. So I was publishing books. I had a blog like from the cell block. And yeah, it was cool. So I experienced a little bit of success, and I was getting paid for my writing and stuff too. So I experienced, a little bit of financial success while I was still in. So when I came out, I had this vision, like I wanted to take it to the next level because, being a writer and coming from that background, to me, the ultimate or the highest level of being a writer is writing for film, because that's like the biggest platform, that's like the biggest medium. So that's what I wanted to get into. I wanted to write, but I also wanted to direct. So I came out, with that thought. And, while I was supporting myself through my journalism, like true crime, gangster stuff, criminal justice reform, stuff like that, like, injustices. Um, at the same time, I was pursuing film stuff. And, I did some little stuff. I did some little shorts. I called Easter Bunny Assassin, like some crazy stuff I put on YouTube. And I tried a little acting for like the independent movie. So I was trying a little bit of different stuff. Um, but then I really kind of found my niche when I went back to the true crime stuff. So, and this is another lucky thing that happened to me. Like I say, I've had things kind of happen to me on each end of the spectrum, like either bad or like really good. I'm like really extreme kind of personality, the way shit happens to me. So, like I got a 25-year sentence when I was 22 for a first time non-violent offense. But right when I came out 2015, it was like when Making a Murder was like blowing up on Netflix. So that really like put a lot of interest in true crime. So, a lot of people were contacting me. They wanted me to like talk on their documentaries, and after I did that about 3 or 4 times, I was like, man, I could do this shit. So I was like, man, because at first, like making a documentary, I was like, man, how do you make like these big documentaries? I did a couple little short films and put them on YouTube, but I was like, man, these are like these big, massive, 75 man, hour, hour and a half projects, 90-minute projects. Like this shit costs like a lot of money. Like, how do you do this shit? And then, but the true crime genre was kind of blowing up in docs. And I'd written extensively about White Boy Rick and his case and the injustices of his case for like Vice News, The Fix, and a bunch of other publications while I was in prison. And when I got out, I was doing everything I could to help him get out. And while I was doing this, I met this filmmaker, Sean Reck, who had just put this movie out called A Murder in the Park that was on Showtime. And I interviewed him for Vice about that movie. And we started talking, and he found out my background, and he was looking for his next project. And I kind of pitched the White Boy Rick story to him. And he had just heard, that they were doing a Hollywood movie with Matthew McConaughey. So he was like, oh man, that story has legs, man. We can do a doc on that. So, I kind of made that happen. It was based off all my articles. I wrote and produced it. And yeah, so that was kind of my entrance, and Sean Reck mentored me in how to make films. I mean, I knew how to write story, but I didn't really know how to make films, and I definitely didn't know the business side. So Sean Reck, he took me under his wing, and he mentored me, and I was really lucky in that regard because he had done like 200 Crime Stopper shows and in Ohio, national, but for like Fox and all the networks and stuff, CBS and stuff. He was based in Ohio, but he had won 9 regional Emmys, out of Ohio. And so like when I went to his office and I saw the Emmys and I was like, man, this dude knows what the fuck he's doing. So I kind of he mentored me and he trained me. I got trained by like a 9-time winning Emmy director, producer. So he kind of taught me how to do docs. And then his White Boy became successful and kind of blew up on Netflix at the end of the pandemic, which was kind of like the Tiger King effect. Um, I had got other people started being interested in my work and started, funding my projects and investing in me. So now, since then, I got like basically, the last year and a half, I got like 7 projects in motion. I got 3 close to completion. 2 others are getting near, and 2 that are about to go in post. And I got a lot of options for stuff that I'm going to start again like in January as I start getting this stuff out. So yeah, I got a ton of shit that's going to hit next year. And like I say, I'm still doing books. I do a little bit of journalism, not that much journalism anymore, but I still got books coming out. I got this book called Thug Life coming out next year. I got Prison Basketball. I got Prison Stories 2. I got this other book that I'm putting together called Gay for the Stage, Straight at the Gate, about how dudes go into prison and become homosexuals, and then when they get out, they're straight again. So where I interviewed, a lot of people that did that. And then I got all these documentary projects. I got this Nightlife, which just premiered. Nightlife, which is about a group of violence interrupters on the north side of St. Louis. It just won the Leon Award at the St. Louis International Film Festival, which is an extremely prestigious award where I got Best Documentary Film Audience Choice Award. I beat out 50 other films, like from all over the world. and I just won this for best film, best director, which was crazy. I had no idea. I didn't expect this, and I just won that, and so that's going to come out. I got this other project called Dope Men, which is about the mafia and heroin. I got this other project called A Tortured Mind, which is it's about a form of PTSD that they call PICS. It's about post incarceration syndrome. PICS. It's like a form of PSD. So it's about this guy that was, he was a drug addict. He was kind of a fuck up drug addict. He went to prison in California, and the feds in the state. He witnessed a lot of violence, and he just came out worse, dude. He came out a worse drug addict. He came out with mental illness issues, and then he eventually, like, he died of an overdose. So this A Tortured Mind, the reality of PICS. It's about, that's what it's about. It's about how, they put you in prison just because you're a drug addict, and they don't give you any help for your drug addiction, and then you just get worse, and then they stick you back out in the world, and they don't give you any help or any support. And that's what they do. A lot of dudes end up going back in because they commit more crime, or a lot of dudes end up overdosing, on fentanyl and stuff, because they start doing heroin, and they get out, and fentanyl's everywhere, and they don't know the strength of fentanyl. So so it's crazy. And then I got a project called Tangle Roots, which is the true story of Humboldt County, which is about the marijuana growers up in the Emerald Triangle, and all the trials and tribulations they went through, and how they thought, like, when legalization started, like, that their fortunes were made, and it hasn't been true, because big pharma is like phasing out these small farmers, and these legacy farmers, these legacy operators, are the ones that champion marijuana for the last 50 years. And prison didn't stop them from growing. The DEA didn't stop them from growing. The helicopters and military coming into their areas in the Emerald Triangle didn't stop them growing. But legalization is freezing them out, is stopping them growing. So that's what that documentary is about. That's going to be a docu-series, 4-part series. I got this other docu-series called Psychedelic Revolution: The Secret History of the LSD Trade, which it looks at LSD all the way from the beginning, and when it was synthesized by Albert Hoffman, to the Summer of Love, and the Grateful Dead, and all the outlaw chemists, like Bear Owsley Stanley, Tim Scully, Leonard Picard. Then part two goes into the war on drugs, and how the DEA used to target the Grateful Dead lots, and arrest people, and send in all the narcs, and all the crazy sentences that all these nonviolent offenders were getting for a drug that basically has therapeutical, spiritual, and medicinal value. And then it looks at now, part three looks at now, like the Renaissance, because now, as marijuana legalization has kind of swept the nation, the last 5 to 7 years, now people are like going back and looking at psychedelics and LSD, like, how can these help people? What medical value do they have? And so it's weird. It's weird. Like I tell people, like, I was a psychedelic cannabis warrior, man. I was a soldier. I was on the front lines. I mean, this is my culture, and I always believed in this stuff. I always stood by my convictions, and now all this stuff is coming back. So I feel really, really justified about my beliefs, because everything that I held to be true as a 14 or 15-year-old kid is now finally coming true. I mean, it took a long time, and I had to pay a heavy price, but whatever. When you're right, you're right. So I got a couple other projects, but that's the main ones. It should be coming out in the first 6 months of next year.
So where can people find these short films and your movies that you've done, and your blogs, and everything that you've written about, and catch up with you on social media too, for that matter?
Yeah, so I got a YouTube channel, Seth Ferranti's True Crime. Where I've been putting little stuff, but I'm about to amp that up in 2023. I'm about to start doing a lot more stuff on there. I've been growing that, surely, and slowly but surely. So I'm amping that up. I'm recording a lot of content for that right now, and then I'm gonna start putting it out in 2023. So that's called Seth Ferranti's True Crime. I also have a Substack, which is like a Patreon for writers, where I got like free subscription, but I also got like stuff behind a paywall, where I put the more exclusive stuff. So in the free stuff, I recycle a lot of my old articles, because I've literally, like, for Vice and these other publications, I've literally published like thousands and thousands of articles, like on true crime and prison and stuff like that. So I recycle my old articles, on the free Substack subscription, but I have more exclusive content that's never been seen before behind the paywall. And it's you can subscribe to that. It's $5 a month. So that's my Substack, and that's called Seth Ferranti's True Crime 2. And then I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram under my name, like Seth Ferranti, at Seth Ferranti. I'm not huge, but I got a decent following. I think I got like 15, 20,000 on Instagram, probably like 5, 10,000 Facebook, and I got probably like 5,000 on my Twitter. So, I got some fans, I got some followers, but I'm not huge by any means. But I do believe as all this stuff starts coming out next year, my fan base is going to grow. Especially with these documentary projects, that I'm writer, director, executive producer of that are put out by my studio, Outlaw Films.
So, before we conclude this interview, is there anything that you'd like to talk about or plug that we haven't covered yet?
No, I would just say, I know a lot of ex-cons, man, in entertainment. Like my dude Freeway Ricky Ross. I mean, he's doing big things. I mean, my boy White Boy Rick, he got like a marijuana brand. Freeway got a marijuana brand. My boy Sinister Monopoly, he does like the artwork. My guy Layer Cake Kenny, he does artwork stuff. My boy Arthur Williams Jr., he does stuff. My dude Punch, he does artwork. There's just a lot of these stories out there, man. And up until this point, there's been a lot of these. I'm not knocking these Hollywood writers, but I mean, maybe these dudes, they have the pedigree. They went to Yale, or they went to Brown, or they went to Harvard, and they're really good writers. But they're the ones that have been writing all these stories up to this point. So I'm just saying, you know, I'm here now. These other guys are here now. I mean, we need to be writing these stories. America is fascinated with these crime stories. They're fascinated with these mafia, these drug stories. Why are these people that never experience this lifestyle, why are they like writing these stories? They're getting it wrong. I'm not saying there's some good movies out there, but they're getting it wrong. So we're here now, we can get it right. So support us, man. Check out our stuff. We're putting out quality stuff. It's not all about Hollywood. A lot of times it's about little independent studios like Outlaw Films. Support Outlaw Films. Follow me. Check out what I got coming on. I got my own brand. I got access that these people in Hollywood never had. It. They can't get the access that I have, and I can put out quality products. High production value products, just like they can. So it's not such an exclusive club anymore. And so support the people. We live these stories. We are these stories. We pay the price for these stories. So stop putting money in these people's pockets, like that they're not even from the culture. They're not from the culture. Why are they benefiting from the culture? Just like for the weed industry, put the money in the pockets of the legacy farmers, the legacy operators. Why are all the big pharma, why are they co-opting the cannabis industry? Put the money with the people who helped us get where we are. So that's all I got to say to people. I mean, I'm not saying you can't like something. You can like whatever you want, but realize what's real and what's fake and what's an illusion and what's not an illusion.
That was my interview with Seth Ferranti. For extra content, ad-free episodes, and more perks, head on over to patreon.com/unforbiddentruth. Thank you for listening. See you on the next one.